humanity that believes in hell. There's something about I appreciate that we're live.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want anyone to miss this cool conversation, man.
um, there people get stuck on the idea of like, do you think there's no punishment? Like punishment is so important to people, at least
Why?
that's what I've been noticing in those conversations.
Why? And they don't care what degree of punishment as long as you get punished.
Right. A- And
And
like
the
that's
more punishment, the better. But no
yeah,
punishment for me. I don't deserve that.
right. No. No, it's always other people that deserve the punishment. And they'll shame you if you don't think you do deserve that punishment.
Or
Like,
that the universe doesn't deserve the punishment,
right.
or.
Right. Yeah, I don't get that. I find that to be not a safe assumption that that punishment is just the way the universe works. Like I don't think that that's necessarily true, and I think it's a mistake to look at society and say this must be also how God works. Because my understanding is that society is actually a good example of the the way that people work apart from God.
It would be the opposite of the deity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an example of contrast.
Uh huh.
It's not how great mercy works or great justice.
Because
Um,
part of God's Aeonian purpose at the moment is for the world to be in blissful ignorance. Maybe not
right.
blissful ignorance, but just total ignorance about God's grand operation. And so, I mean,
Right.
we're ignorant of what's going on in our next door neighbor's house, much less
That's right.
what's going on in God's house.
Yeah. So that's Mac's deep thought about hell this morning, but I uh I don't buy it.
By the way, boys and girls, just before we went live, I was telling Mac that in the book that we're going to read today, there's a paragraph or two about how that there was no hell mentioned throughout the Old Testament, and then the Old Testament closes up with Malachi, and it's 400 years before the New Testament shows up. As and so there's no prophet, there's no movement of God in Israel during this 400 years, so they had plenty of time to get sucked in by Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, and Roman mythology, which would include all these hell things. Oh, and by the way, Mac, have you noticed that in Timothy, First Timothy, Second Timothy, and Titus, Paul warns about Jewish myths
Right.
and
Old.
old womanish myths,
Yeah. Yep.
and one other phrase of myths. But yeah, so for the longest time, I read Paul's warning about Jewish myths and pagan myths and old womanish myths. And I thought, what is he referring to? This must be it.
Right.
Because the Jewish mythological people, I mean, the Jews borrowed the Egyptian mythology of hell. And even when Jesus slung the rich man and Lazarus back in the Pharisees' face, he wasn't endorsing the damn doctrine or
Right.
that it was a doctrine. He was just using one of their own pet mythologies against them
Right.
by saying that they were like the rich man because they had at least some kind of access to the law and the prophets and you know the notions of God, but they were not very generous to the poor man who has
Right.
no notions of God, and they were just happy to condemn him to the pagan mythology of hell. But they were the ones who were going to be embarrassed and condemned and have less of a, what shall we say, future than they thought
Right.
they were going to have.
Right. That's clearly what it's about. I
You,
mean, to
you
think
know,
that it's actually a teaching about the afterlife, you're missing everything about that.
yeah. I find it funny that the Christians, like Eric and JG and Jill and Beckel and the crew,
Hmm.
they will quote that passage where Jesus says, I never knew you. You will be saying to me, uh, "We cast out demons in your name.
Right.
We did miracles in your name," and the whole vocabulary of the discussion goes right over their fucking heads
Yeah.
because it's not the politicians who say we cast out demons in your name. It's
Right.
the Christians who are saying we cast out demons in your name. So could it be that the Christians will be the ones God says, I never knew you? It's not the Aztecs who said we cast out demons in your name.
Nope.
It's not the university professors who say we cast out. It's only the Christians who have a Christian television show, you
Right.
know,
That's
and
right.
are part of that whole Christian movement.
Only ones I see
But
doing
Jill
it.
Beckel, JG, and Eric will never condemn the whole Christian movement. They got a
Right.
television show, TBN, the PTL Club, the 700 Club, Christian radio,
Sure.
and they're the only ones who brag. We cast out demons in the name of Jesus. We healed, we prayed. Oh, yeah. Look at our track record.
Right. Look at
So,
all the
could
stuff.
Jesus say to these Christians, you guys are a bunch of Pharisees? I never knew you.
Um, isn't that, I mean, not to take away from what you're saying, but isn't the context of that conversation about the kingdom of heaven though?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it obviously is congruent, but
And I love to point out that the kingdom aspect of God's Eonian purpose is still a temporary situation
hmm
because the kingdom will fulfill its purpose and then God will become all in
right.
all. But during the kingdom, it's a different ball game altogether. And God has many ball games going on.
Yeah.
You know,
There's folks on the outside and folks on the inside and
mm-hmm.
all kinds of divisions being made.
Yeah, yeah. It's a grand and glorious movie with 6 or 8 subplots going on. Hey, look at
Right.
this! Look at this Noah's flood. Isn't that
Right.
interesting? Hey, look at Cain and Abel. Oh, isn't that interesting? Hey, look at Jesus reigning for 1,000 years. Oh, yeah. Isn't that? Hey, look, Satan is let loose after the 1,000 years. Oh my God, what the hell's that all about?
Right.
I mean, how in the world are we going to put all these subplots together? Oh, look at this Judas character. He's awful.
Right.
He's awful, man. He betrayed the Lord. He's one of the disciples, the 12 apostles. What? How do we figure all this stuff out?
Right. You need a bird's eye view. You need a God's eye view to figure it all out. Which,
Hey, speaking of bird's eye view,
yeah.
some years ago, I learned that when an eagle is flying around up in the air looking for dead meat, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or easy targets because they're lazy, like all
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out, as according to I understand now, that another eagle will be about a mile away looking for stuff, and they watch each other.
Oh,
So if one of them sees something to eat and flies down, then a whole bunch of them will see it and they'll fly down and eat it too.
interesting.
Share the loot.
Sure.
And anyway, I learned that years ago, and then I feed the birds in my backyard.
hmm
And so I can see that activity happening among all the birds because wild ducks come into my backyard to eat the food, and doves come in like gangbusters to eat the food, and apparently they all watch each other. So if one of them goes down to check it out and he survives it, the rest of them will
Right.
come down. And I've looked out in the backyard, and there might be 50 or 100 doves
Oh,
back
wow.
there, and anywhere from 2 to 15 wild ducks in the backyard, just chomping away.
Fantastic.
Isn't that lovely?
Sounds beautiful. Very nice. Yeah, so I guess the bird's eye view has also got half an eye on their on their companion over there
Uh
or the competition.
huh.
That's interesting. I had a phone interview yesterday with a new restaurant. I
Yeah.
told the guy, I said, what's your average covers per night? And he told me, and I said, I think I could probably double that for you. And he said, well, what are you talking about? How do you know how to do that? And I'm like, look, I can't give away all my secrets, but I think I could double that for you. And I hope I wasn't too braggadocious, but
All right. So wait a minute now. What do you mean by cover?
oh,
Individually price?
no, covers are individual people that walk into the restaurant and spend money. That's what you
Uh,
call a guest, is a cover. Like, how many
okay.
covers did you do tonight? He says he's got capacity for seating 300 people, but
Yeah.
he does about 120 a night. So
Uh-huh.
anyway,
And so you would use the old marketing secrets
I
of
sure would of ASTEO.
email and postcards. Yeah. Okay.
And just getting to know people,
Uh huh.
asking them about themselves and investing in the regulars. I'm
Because we're all
confident.
suckers for love.
That's right. Yep.
And if someone loves us, hell, we'll come back and we'll eat your spaghetti.
Also, he told me, he's like, we really value a drama-free work environment. And I said, oh, you must have read the book about how the games people play. He hasn't read that, but I was like, I'm all about a drama-free environment too. I don't know how you manage it, but I'll do my best.
So why'd you bail out of your old restaurant?
Um, it was just kind of it was. I guess it's burnout. I mean, they described the experience I was having as burnout. I wasn't
Uh
feeling
huh.
that enthusiastic about it anymore. There were a lot of um, changes that I wanted to see happen in the organization of the restaurant, just that I'd been working on for years and not getting any support for. So that was getting frustrating and kind of wearing me down too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been there 20 years, so I felt like it was just time. Like, it's good to keep moving sometimes,
Uh huh.
So trying new things, and that's how I explained it to the boss. Is I just really need some new challenges and try a different environment, a different uh, kind of restaurant and everything. So this place will pay me more too. So there's some pragmatic um,
Sweet.
ideas, in place,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully I can. What I'm really aiming for is a higher income and a less demanding schedule. Because I just want to be home more. I want to be gardening more. I want to be around the kids more, and I just want more peace in my life. And so, I want to go from 80 hours a week to maybe 50, and I think that's reasonable at my age to ask for. So,
Why not?
yeah,
What have you got to lose?
exactly. I mean, maybe everything, but it is weird being unemployed. But I'm trusting God, and I'm trusting that I'll land in the right place
Mm-hmm.
where I need to be. So
Hey, I got a proper sales outline to give you. You got a pencil? You want to write it down?
yeah, give me a sec. You're okay.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Welcome, brothers and sisters, to a special presentation of the Ace Theological Hootenanny. We're going to tackle a book that was written in the 1850s or 1860s by Thomas B. Thayer. And my headline for the book is The Pagan Origins of the Christian Hell. His headline was a little different. His headline was The Origin and History of the Doctrine of Endless Punishment. But I thought that was too long. I thought I could get a little bit more mileage with my headline. Anyway, so he's not alive anymore, so I don't think he'll complain. But we're going to give him the credit. He wrote the book. It's The Pagan Origins of Christian Hell. Now, so when last night, I was going to say most recently, I'll tell you last night, I went over and listened to Eric's channel a bit. I didn't participate, very much. I did say hello to somebody in the side chat, but that's about it, right? I didn't go in the talking heads. I didn't try and stir up trouble in the side chat. I just listened to them, and they're mean. They're mean and self-righteous, and they just love this Christian hell business. And there's a great psychology going on with the Christian hell. I swear to God, it's just damn awful. It results in, the very idea that God is going to torment someone, a whole bunch of someones, but not me. It leads to self-righteousness and the attitude of a damn prick. You can be mean to people if you believe that God himself is going to get them and punish them. And you don't have to shed a tear. You don't have to have any empathy because God is not empathetic with these sinners. They have a free will, don't you know? And I used my free will to straighten myself out, and they could have done it. And if they go to hell, I don't give a damn. And that's their whole attitude. And they can't see that they with their mouth they say, well, I love everybody. I want everybody to be saved. I hope you're right, Ace, but I don't believe you're right. I'm just happy that God's gonna burn their asses in hell forever. There's just not a drop of empathy in the doctrine itself. It doesn't lead to a wonderful world. They'd have to rewrite that Satchmo song if they had any control over it. I see people burning in hell, and I'm glad it's not me. And I say to myself, what a wonderful. You mock my pain, Mac the human. You mock my pain. Anyway, so when we're ready, we'll get the show started by start reading the book. But meanwhile, me and Mac are having fun chatting. And also, you can come in and chat. And also, if you are of a mind, you can help us read the book too. There's the StreamYard link. Be sure and give us a thumbs up and leave comments on this show. Afterwards, go ahead and comment now too. And also tell Eric, JG, Jill, Beckel, Praise I Am, and any evangelical pastor, Calvinist or Free Willer, that they should come over and watch this show, The Pagan Origins of the Christian Hell. It might help them to know that the Bible does not teach the Christian hell. Oh, yeah, there's something about the lake of fire, and something about the rich man and Lazarus, and something about the sheep and the goats. But how awful that the Christians who are looking for trouble, because they have been influenced by Egyptian pagan mythology and Greek pagan mythology and Roman pagan mythology and so forth. They're influenced by that, and so they would go to the Bible and look for that kind of trouble, and they would use the lake of fire, the rich man Lazarus, and the sheep and the goats, and totally make inferences and conjecture. But there is no clear doctrine that this is what God is going to do. He's going to torment the sinner in hell or annihilate them permanently. In fact, there are over 100 wonderful passages that indicate that God is going to save his creation. He is the creator of all and the redeemer of all and the savior of all. And the idea that God would destroy the vast majority of his own creation doesn't speak well of him.
Exactly.
It kind of makes him look like a 5-year-old who doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He built a sandcastle only to kick it down. When 9/11 happened, I'm sure there's people alive today who weren't even born on 9/11. But when 9/11 happened, one of my thoughts at the time was that if it was indeed these moronic little Muslims that took
Hmm.
the buildings down, it doesn't take much ingenuity to destroy something like
Right.
a building, but it takes a lot of ingenuity and beauty and presence of mind to build something.
Right.
And so, if God is a builder who kind of builds a sandcastle only to kick it down, that doesn't speak well of him. Anyway, welcome, Monty Burns. Oh, God. Monty Burns is he's one of the guys who believes in
I
the
know.
Christian Hill. His version of it is a little more pleasant. He believes that God is just going to annihilate a fella.
Who's the mystery of faith and reason?
I don't
Who's
know.
the
Let's see. He sounds real pleasant so far. It's because you're an idiot.
It's true. I'm an idiot. I confess. I don't know if
That's
he
right.
means me. If they mean me, I don't know.
The mystery of faith and reason. You know who this sounds like? It sounds like Dude Saint.
Oh,
Because Dude Saint often uses the word mystery and he freely calls people idiots.
yeah, I know that about him.
Yeah.
I don't know much else because I usually turn it off if I
Uh
see
huh.
him doing that kind of stuff. That's not discourse.
With emphasis on dis,
Right.
not course.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
God, if I'm an idiot, God made me that way. Yeah, is that the name of the book?
Oh, yeah, this is the official name of the book, The
It's a
History and Origin of the Doctrine of Endless Punishment.
Yeah, Monty doesn't believe in everlasting hell. I think he believes in temporary hell or something.
Well, I mean, if God is going to annihilate his creation,
Right.
that is hell. That is insanity on God's part.
Yeah.
To create something only to destroy it? What type of insanity is it? That is
Right.
a. So remember my definition of how to be mentally ill?
Yeah.
My steps, there's 3 steps, you know. You must overlook the good, focus on the bad, and exaggerate the importance of the bad. So if God annihilates the most of his creation in hell, well, then he's overlooking the good that he's done. He's focusing on the bad that he has done, and he's exaggerating the importance of the
Yeah.
bad that he
That's
has done, and he is going to solve the problem by. Oh, God.
mentally ill God.
Yes.
May it not be coming to that.
May it not be coming to that.
I'm excited about this book.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting topic to me, mythology and like the origins of ideas like that. I I once read, have you ever read a book called Foucault's Pendulum?
No. What's that about?
Wish I could remember the author. It's a novel and it's about a character that um he falls into this world of secret societies and conspiracies and mystical ideas and Rosicrucians and Knights Templar, and it makes him crazy. He runs around the world trying to get to the bottom of it all. And there's a scene, um, kind of right in the middle of the book and in the middle of his story arc, where he's talking to a lady, an old friend of his, who catches up with him and says she's worried about him. And she says, all of this stuff is really simple. She's like, um, when you fall down, it's bad, and you get hurt. And so down has always been associated with bad. And when you
Uh
get up in the morning, that's good. So up has always been associated with good. And she
huh.
talks about things like, she explains, like, she basically grounds all of these goofy mystical concepts into our day to day lives and experiences. And and says, "Look, there's no mystery to uncover. This is how humanity has understood the world that they find themselves in since before they could even talk." And it sort of shatters his whole this illusionary world he'd built around him. And I think like suffering is bad whether you can talk about it or not, and there's these experiences we can have in life. Some of them are painful and some of them are really wonderful. And it makes sense that a primitive mind with no direction from God would map that onto the question of what happens after we die.
Hmm.
Well, either you're suffering or you're not. Like it's going to be one of those two things. And I don't know, like I could see that makes sense. Like as an infant would understand the question of what actually an infant would ask, what happens after we die? That makes sense. That people would pre-Abrahamic people would struggle with that,
Uh-huh.
let's say. So, um, yeah, so I think that there's something kind of materialistic and interesting about the origin of ideas like hell, of the origin of these old superstitions and womanly myths,
Uh-huh.
because they help us understand ourselves. Hey, it's Kevin. What's up, Trustee 8? That's a good fella.
You know him?
Yeah, just from around the YouTubes.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
He's a good guy.
Oh, brother Monty says it's sad.
That's just the way it is. Come
It's
on, Monty.
sad.
Who's sad? Is God sad about it? Is God does God regret
You know what,
his failure?
Monty? If at some point in the so-called heaven, where you're sitting there for 1,000 years or a million years, if a tear trickles from your eye because you miss all of us guys, because you're sad that most of creation didn't make it, well, then heaven becomes hell. As soon as you get sad over the lost being lost,
Can you imagine how miserable heaven would be?
oh my God.
Everyone worried about their loved ones that are suffering eternally. Sounds awful.
It's sad. I, I don't know if I don't even want to be in heaven. It'll be so sad for everyone else to be in hell. Oh my God. Monty Burns, give me a break. God is not a loser. If he annihilates most of his creation, he simply respects their free will decision. Monty, tell me what human, since the beginning of Adam, has a clear brain that you personally would entrust with a so called free will? All of us, Monty, are mentally retarded. You wouldn't want to give any of the humans a free will to determine their eternal destiny because we're stupid, don't you know? Damn it.
We're sure to blow it.
Except you. You're the smartest guy on the block. All right, let's see if we can find our way here and do a present, share screen. The pagan origins. There we go.
Oh, that's a messy page.
Uh,
You were
that's
right.
it was real long.
Hmm.
I shortened it. I took the leading out.
Oh, gotcha.
Let me. Oh, that's not even it. Crap.
Oh,
What am I doing here? Okay. Yeah, that was my own cover page so I could make a thumbnail. So let me,
Uh,
because thumbnails are important, you know.
yeah.
I got two of them.
Lucky. All right, I brought it up. Want me to read the preface?
Let's see. Do I have it? Yes, this is it. Okay, go ahead.
This little work is written for the purpose of furnishing a sketch of the argument by which it is shown that the doctrine of endless punishment is not of divine origin, but traceable directly to a heathen source. It is not intended as an elaborately philosophical or critical discussion of the subject, as the size of the volume will show, but only as a popular presentation of the method of proof, and of the leading facts and authorities on which the argument rests. Those having time and sources of information at command will enter into a more thorough investigation for themselves.
Oh,
For
hang on,
such,
hang on, hang on.
yeah.
Now, keep in mind, he wrote this during the cowboy days,
Oh, wow.
right? Like 100 years before the internet ever showed up. Now read that opening paragraph there again.
Right. He's not talking about Googling it.
No, no. Those who are living their lives in a library of Congress or a university library, those having time and sources of
Sources.
information at command,
Right.
like who can do that in the cowboy days?
Well, they're going to enter into a more thorough investigation for themselves, he predicts, because
Uh,
it's such a compelling idea. For such, this work is not designed, but for those who, not having the opportunity nor the books necessary to a complete and critical examination of the question, wish a brief statement of the facts and arguments on which is grounded the assertion that the doctrine of endless torments is of heathen origin. This will account for the absence of many things which the reader might justly expect to find here, and which rightfully claim place in a work bearing the title of this. The subject treated is one of very great importance, and equally concerns the purity of Christian doctrine and the happiness and virtue of those believing. It is every day commanding more and more attention from serious and thoughtful minds, and on all sides and in the churches of all sects, there is increased inquiry into the foundations of the doctrine and rapidly growing doubts of its divine origin and authority. Wow, this is really good writing. What year was this written?
I think 1850, 1855,
Fantastic.
before the government school system came about, which made us all stupid.
Right, exactly. That's exactly it. That John Dewey guy.
I know Dewey and Webster stole
Yep,
the school system from the Prussians, who bragged that they did not create a school system to make statesmen and intelligent people. They created a school system to make better cannon fodder,
that's it.
people
The
who would just go and die for their country.
the Prussian system it was called.
Yeah. How far
Because
are
they
you?
it is possible.
You're
I'm right
looking
at the
at it
bottom
is
of
possible.
yeah.
It is possible.
It is possible the following pages. So down.
Down?
Yeah, it's past the page break. I was just at the
Okay.
page break.
It is possible. Okay. Got
Yeah.
it.
It is possible the following pages may help to answer some of the questions growing out of this state of mind, and to show how a doctrine thoroughly heathen in origin and character came to be adopted in the Christian church.
Oh my
S-
God. That's such an accusation.
Thoroughly heathen in origin and character. The sale of the first edition of nearly 2,000 copies in the space of 3 or more months. What a what a brag that is.
I
Without
know
being
for the cowboy days.
yeah, that's like everybody in town and the next town over got one.
Uh huh.
Without being advertised in any form has encouraged me to believe that the work meets an actual want and will be serviceable to the cause of truth. In the preparation of the present edition, therefore, I've made considerable additions and I trust improvements also, in the hope of making it more worthy and more useful. 2 chapters and 2 sections entire have been added, and chapters 3, 4, and 6 have been greatly enlarged. and the argument illustrated and fortified by new facts and authorities. Still, the book is far from what I could wish, or what it might be made if time and all the means of investigation were at command. Yet, such as it is, I send it forth again to do what work it may, believing that in the conflict of opinions, truth is only immortal, and cheerfully confident, therefore, that at last all error and all evil will perish. This guy is a brother.
Yeah.
My heart just leapt. That's beautiful. He trusts the way
He,
truth works.
right. He's one of us, huh?
Yeah.
He would have been a part of the Ace Theo channel.
Oh, for sure. He would have been over here jousting with Jill.
Hey, that's an alliteration. Jousting with Jill.
We'll call Sundays Jousting with Jill.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Since the above was written, this work has passed through several large editions. The present issue has additional testimonies strengthening the argument in its various branches. Most of these, with the exception of those pertaining to chapters 3 and 4, which are inserted in the body of the text, are
That's
gathered
3 and
into.
9.
Oh, 3 and 9, right. V
Yeah.
is the 5.
IX is 10. I mean,
Right,
X
right.
is 10, so IX would be 9.
9, thanks.
I
Those are inserted
Yeah,
in the body.
just so you'll know, boys and girls, this is Roman numerals. I is 1, V is 5, X is 10. And if they,
C is
depending on where they
120.
put how they structure thing. Anyway, so you can do your homework and find out how to understand Roman numerals.
Yeah, if it was XI, it'd be 11 when you
Right.
subtract the one before. Anyway, notes and stuff are added. This was Boston in chilly January of 1871.
Right. So he probably started the work in 1850 or 60. But this edition, the latest, is 1871. Cool. When John Wayne was out there shooting up Indians. When let's see who else was what they were doing in 1871. Oh yeah, Jesse James was out there robbing banks with the James gang, and Wyatt Earp was shooting it out with the some guy. I don't know what the hell. Okay, go ahead.
It was 29 degrees out that day. I just looked it up. Well, that month in Boston.
Oh my God, you are funny.
All right, chapter 1, the period before the law. No law announced to our first parents, with the penalty of endless punishment annexed. I'm trying to pronounce the capital letters. Not revealed in the history of their transgression, nor in that of Cain, the deluge, or Sodom and Gomorrah.
Lord have mercy. We can stop right there. I mean, these two lines just prove our whole point.
Absolutely. Those were foundational sins. you know,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
what's going on?
No hell was promised to Cain and Abel. No hell was promised to the people who
To
died in
Adam and
Noah's
Eve?
flood, and
Yeah,
no hell was promised to Sodom and Gomorrah.
definitely
Just
not.
death. Death is the wages of sin, and death is no problem for the God who raised Christ from the dead. He can and will raise all from the dead. And if you don't believe me, check out 1 Corinthians chapter 15. The whole dang thing is all about the resurrection of the dead, plural, not just Christ, singular.
Right. Then we got chapter 2, the period under the law, including endless punishment not taught by Moses in the law, nor is it mentioned anywhere in the Bible. I mean, that kind of finishes in the conversation, too.
Yeah, yeah.
Testimony of Orthodox critics and theologians to this point, Old Testament doctrine of hell, Sheol, general application of the argument, and objections to the foregoing argument answered. That's awesome. There should be more of that in modern discourse, like
Uh huh.
anticipating the objections and just going ahead and answering them, just to get the waste of time out of the way.
Right.
I just think that's a really honest and cool thing like intellectually honest thing to do. Chapter 3 is going to be endless punishment of heathen origin. This might be the meat of it for us. Well, for me anyway, for my curiosity. Description of the heathen hell, its location, inhabitants, and punishment compared with church doctrine. The doctrine invented by heathen legislators and poets.
What? What?
Shown by their own confession.
What?
I've heard before that Dante's Inferno had a huge impact on how Christianity conceived of hell because of its popularity and because of it being told as if it was a true story.
Oh my God.
I've never read it, but I guess it's a lot about like punishment, like specific punishments and descriptions of hell. You know, he's probably talking about more ancient poets than Dante, though. Maybe. The Jews borrowed the doctrine from the heathen. Chapter 4. That's what 4 looks like in Roman numerals. The historical argument on this point. That's
Oh,
interesting.
you know
That
that
would have,
just the headline itself. The Jews borrowed the doctrine from the heathen.
right.
That's I mean, what are the Christians going to say? That's not true. They're going to
I
defend.
guess.
They're going to defend the doctrine of hell. When somebody says, "Wait a minute, the Jews borrowed this doctrine," it's kind of like observable and provable.
Yeah, we can show where it came from. There's documents. It's chapter 5. It's not taught in the New Testament, you guys. Salvation of Christ, not from this. The New Testament doctrine of hell, section 2, section 3. Unquenchable fire. How used in the scriptures, how used by Greek writers. That's a big thing. Section
Mm-hmm.
4, everlasting, eternal, and forever, not endless. That's interesting. That must be where he talks about aeon.
Uh huh.
Um, testimony of lexicographers and critics, usage of Greek authors, and scripture usage. And then section 5, the second death. But wait, there's more. Chapter 6, the introduction of the doctrine into the Christian church. The general corruption of the early church. This is going to be controversial.
Uh
This
oh.
this
The
reminds me of J.D. Russell.
general corruption.
The first appearance of the doctrine, its form. First, the wicked not raised from the dead or underworld. Well, that's interesting. Second, raised and punished. Third, future punishment ending in annihilation. And fourth, endless punishment. So he's going to argue that there's a kind of a progression of ideas there. It
Looks
looks
like
like.
it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Condemnation of universalism and endless punishment decreed orthodox. AD
Oh my God.
553.
You know, I
Ouch.
was over on Eric's channel last night, and they were condemning universalism.
That's still
You could
going on.
almost hear, you could almost hear that they were saying they didn't say it, but they said, "Well, universalists smell funny."
The Fifth Ecumenical Council. That's what he's referring to. No, the second council of Constantinople condemned the teachings of universalism.
Where are you? I
AD
can't.
553. I just looked it up.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, I want to know what he was talking about.
okay.
Specifically targeting the writings of Origen, who was an early church father. Interesting. All right, the doctrine creates a cruel and revengeful spirit, illustrated from history.
No, that's for sure. They even say universalists smell funny with no evidence.
This is, I mean, this is what drove me away from Christianity, this reality.
Oh yeah.
The cruel and revengeful spirit that's all over the place and from the nicest people. If you corner them and ask them about hell, they shrug their shoulders and say, hey, some people, they missed the boat. It's a hell of a boat. All right, influence on faith and character, Tertullian's exaltation, Catholic crusades against the Genesis massacre of
Albigensians.
Albigensis.
Oh yeah, they killed them.
Crusades.
The Albigensians were slaughtered by the
Were they like
Catholics.
a what
They
what?
were there down through history. There was a number of Christian movements that were neither Protestant nor Catholic, and the
Oh,
Albigensians was one of them. They weren't exactly Protestant. They weren't exactly Catholic.
hmm. The massacre of Saint Bartholomew. Of course, everybody talks about that. The
Oh yeah,
Catholic, the Catholic Inquisition.
I saw the movie
Yeah, the
starring
Spanish
Tom
Inquisition.
Cruise.
The Spanish Inquisition and its influence on Monty Python. The, the influence not confined to Catholic believers of the time. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Oh boy. And then chapter 8, comparative moral influence of belief and disbelief of endless punishment, historical contrast.
Okay, read that again.
Yeah, the comparative moral influence of belief and disbelief of endless punishment, historical contrast.
Hmm. You can definitely tell from that sentence that this guy was not influenced by the American government school system. I
Indeed.
mean, it's even worse now with people doing, side chats and text messages that are only 200 characters long. What? We speak emoji here.
Right.
If you're just joining us, boys and girls, give me an emoji in the side chat. Thank you for joining. And by the way, give me a thumbs up right about now. And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. And what we're doing right here is we're going over this book by Brother Thayer, written in the 1800s. And my title for the book is The Pagan Origins of the Christian Hell. The title is a little more complex than my title, but that's what we're doing. Thank you, Chef Dennis, for your emoji. All right, let's go.
So apparently he's going to try to pick apart whether people are more moral or less moral depending on what they believe. That's a tricky task he's undertaking there, but he's going to look at the character of the Pharisees and the Sadducees contrasted in reference to this point, and the influence of the idea of eternal punishment on the morals of the heathen, including the Burmans, who you don't see a lot in these kind of discussions. The
The
Burmans.
Berman.
I think I had a neighbor named Berman. Anyway, there's chapter 9, the influence of the doctrine on the happiness of its believers,
Oh,
illustrated from their own confessions.
wow.
Henry Ward Beecher, that rings a bell.
You know who he was?
A poet, maybe?
He was a poet and I think, like a Unitarian preacher.
Okay.
But as I know him, I'm not sure I should say this, but as I know him, he was an asshole, part of the transcendentalist movement that got
Okay.
the Civil War going. That's why I
Oh,
call him
wow.
an asshole.
Okay.
He and his clan, the Transcendentalists, helped get the Civil War going with their self-righteous Puritanism. Yeah, I could be all wrong because it's been a long time since I've looked
Okay.
into Beecher.
Yeah, that rings a bell, though, that he
But the
was a Civil
Yeah, but
War
the
figure.
Yankee abolitionists,
Right.
he didn't give a crap about slavery.
Right.
From as I recall studying the matter, the abolitionists who went down to the South, they were kind of pissed that the slaves were having a party in their own little quarters, singing and making
Oh,
melody and maybe even getting drunk.
sure.
That pissed them off. They wanted everybody to be serious and work really hard, with the
Yeah.
Puritan work ethic.
Got to go save those primitive
Right, right.
cracked corn drinkers. Yeah.
Uh huh.
That reminds me of that movie Great Balls of Fire about um, what's his name, the rock and roll guy.
Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah, and he was like peeking through the. I mean, it was post-slavery, but he was peeking through the windows at the black like blues club or blues
Right.
bar,
Uh-huh.
and everybody said that's Satan to him,
They were just having a good time in
having
there.
a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, if
Yeah.
that's
Henry
Satan,
Ward
sign me up.
Beecher was with those guys who they didn't like it that the slaves were enjoying themselves too much.
Gotcha. Can't have any enjoyment. Chapter 10, additional testimonies on the questions discussed in the preceding chapters. Okay, that's cool. All right. And here's the meat of it.
Oh, is this okay.
That was the kind of chapters and stuff.
Chapter 1. Here we go.
Shall I?
Oh yeah.
All
You're doing a
right.
great job. And
Thanks, brother.
you're sweet to let me interrupt you
Absolutely. Anytime.
and not lose your place. Stop it. I'm trying to concentrate.
It's just all right. Real quick, morning, Foy and Seth. Nice to see you guys.
Yes, boy. Where have you been?
Where have you been, Foy?
And
All right,
Seth,
chapter
where have you
1,
been?
the
Sorry.
period before the law. The following two positions will be admitted without question, it is believed, by all Christians. First, if the doctrine of endless punishment be, as affirmed by its believers, absolutely and indispensably necessary for the preservation of virtue and to
Wait a
perfect
minute.
obedience.
For the preservation of virtue, that's revealing just all by itself. You will not be good unless there's the threat of hell hanging over your head.
That's right.
That's that's so full of bulla.
That's what somebody in the chat yesterday was talking about. Like, I mean, the flip side of that is the whole stupid notion of, oh, so I could just sin all I want then? You know, like, yeah, go ahead. Deborah actually, I think it was Deborah that said, yeah, sin all you want. What kind of sins are you wanting to do? Because virtue has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, and I don't know if that person is familiar with sin, but um, sin is a lot of work.
Yeah,
It's like exhausting.
just not
I
a
mean,
good time.
think of all the orgies that you have orchestrated, right? There's, you got to rent a hall and invite people, and that costs money, for stamps to invite them to your orgy, and you got to feed them once they get there. Crap, it's almost not worth doing an orgy to have all that work involved.
um, and it's indispensably necessary not just for the preservation of virtue, but also for perfect obedience to the laws of God.
What?
Why else would you have perfect obedience if you weren't
Right.
threatened with eternal
I
punishment?
mean, I mean, some people might just love God for the hell of it, but yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, of course, the threat of endless hell and annihilation would produce perfect obedience to God. I mean, just look at Monty. He's perfectly obedient to God to avoid annihilation.
Exactly.
Come on, God, I've been perfectly obedient to you. Don't annihilate me.
Come on. If this be the salutary and saving influence of the doctrine, then it constitutes one of the strongest possible reasons for its being revealed to man at the very earliest period of the world's history. If endless punishment be true, is terribly true to all those who are in danger, wherein is found another powerful reason why it should have been made known in the clearest manner on the very morning of creation. In the clearest manner, it should not have been left in doubt and obscurity by the use of indefinite terms, but it should have been proclaimed in language which no man could misunderstand, if he would. Rather that rather than that there should be even the possibility of a mistake in a matter of such vast and fearful moment, it should have been graven by special miracle into every soul that God sent into the world. Let us then proceed to inquire if we have any such revelation of the doctrine. When God created Adam and Eve and placed them in the Garden of Eden, did he announce to them any law for their observance, having attached to it the penalty in question? No, he didn't. Surely justice
Oh, it's a
demanded.
rhetorical question.
Yeah,
Oh, I've heard of them. They're rhetorical questions. Yeah. This is a straw man. He's just setting up a straw man. Yeah. We can't use straw man.
but surely justice demanded, if he had forced them into being subject to this awful peril, that he should set out before them both the law and its punishment in the most specific manner. Did he do this? Where's the record of it? Read diligently the first and second chapters of Genesis and see if anything of this sort is recorded there in connection with the creation of man. In chapter 2, 15 through 17, we have this statement. And the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree in the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. This is the only record we have bearing on the subject, but there is no moral law here, which is declared as the future rule of life for them and for all their posterity. They are simply commanded not to eat of the forbidden tree.
Hey, hang
Now,
on,
what?
hang on, hang on. That brings to my mind. JG is often coming over on this channel and arguing with me
Mhm.
that there are moral laws,
Oh, absolutely.
objective morality, and how dare we suggest that some things are relative as opposed to objectively absolute. But what the hell's going on here? Was this command given to Adam a moral, objective law that anybody throughout history could see? Oh yeah, don't eat of the forbidden fruit. Why? It was a subjective matter, only presented to Adam. I mean, God didn't tell me not to eat of that tree. He didn't tell JG not to eat of that tree. He just told Adam it was a subjective matter. It wasn't a objectively moral matter.
It's also, yeah, it's also subjectively evil, too.
Subjectively evil, right? Why? Go on.
Well, yeah, because that, imagine, imagine if Adam was obedient.
Oh
we
my
wouldn't,
God, that
we
would be
wouldn't have
awful.
any, we
That
wouldn't
would
have
be.
any history at all. We'd be there'd be no story, be no unfolding, there'd be no grace, no need for it. It's the same thing. I mean, I think it's a more stunning, at least it was stunning to me when I heard you say that Jesus dying on the cross was good, and
Uh,
was evil. It's a great evil that was also good. Uh, that's that's easier to understand. It's harder to think of like eating some fruit being evil in any kind of way, or why would that lead to death and suffering. But except for simple disobedience being the answer to that. But it, to me, my understanding is that it unfolds a great truth when you see it from what Greg calls the absolute point of view, and see it as an inevitability that Adam eats that fruit, and that's the plan. That's the whole idea of, you know, of giving Adam, you know, the opportunity to breach that obedience. I mean, I think that I mean this guy Thayer, he's not saying it outright, but I think he might agree that it's not like first God said, "Hey, you just so you know, you got to be obedient to me." There was no like general obedience law in place. There was just this instruction about this tree. That's all there
mm-hmm,
was.
mm-hmm.
And for all Adam and Eve knew, maybe it's okay to not do what God says. Why would they know any different? They don't know anything. They're
They're
babies.
ignorant, yeah.
Yeah, so
and they're using their little free will and their pea brains to sort things out.
They're doing their best.
Yeah.
But they got other voices in their heads and, in the garden saying stuff. So, Rob Weil. Anyway, there's no moral law here. This is the only record we have bearing on the subject, but there's no moral law here, which is declared as the future rule of life for them and for all their posterity. Yeah, they are simply commanded not to eat of the forbidden tree. Now, whether this is understood in a literal or allegorical sense, we cannot suppose that we have here the formal announcement of a divine law which claimed the obedience of all mankind on the penalty of endless torment. We certainly cannot believe that God would open the great drama of our life on this earth, involving such infinite consequences, in such brief and doubtful language, and with so little specification where so much was needed. As regards
Mercy.
the penalty of disobeying the commandment, do we find any statement which can be mistaken for endless punishment? God says, "In the day thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die." But this is very far from saying, "Thou shalt after the death of the body be subjected to the torments of an endless hell." That's so true. That's so different. We are told to be sure that this means death temporal, death spiritual, and death eternal, but where's the proof of it? So terrible a doctrine must not be assumed. Yes, but demonstrated by unquestionable evidence. Who can believe that God would reveal so frightful a punishment in language so easily misunderstood? By the single word die, a term employed in such a variety of senses, capable of such a wide latitude of usage. And of course, it's not just that you'll die, it's that you will die to be dying,
Right.
which sounds anything but careless. It sounds like a very precise thing, and it doesn't say anything about endless torment. Would
Mm-hmm.
any earthly parent, if the immortal salvation of his children were at stake, have been so careless of his speech? Would he have chosen language so liable to be mistaken? Would he not rather have announced the awful truth in words which would admit of no possible doubt? Beside, if the terrors of this punishment are so effectual in preventing transgression, this was another reason for a specific declaration of the consequences of disobedience. Exactly. If the argument on this point is good, a plain open threat of endless woe at the very gate of Eden, as they entered, might have kept them back from the forbidden tree and saved them and our race from the dreadful evils which followed the introduction of sin into the world.
Oh, hang on. I want to imagine that just for a minute. Okay, so Adam is about ready to enter the Garden of Eden. There's this big sign on the garden that says, "You're going to hell. Endless conscious torment hell if you eat of that tree back there in the corner."
Yep. Stay the heck away from that tree.
And there's an electric fence around it, by the way. You'll get shocked and then you'll go to hell.
Which, if that was the consequence, that would be on God to like make sure that Adam knew about that. you know? Otherwise, where's the justice? Just going to spring that on him? But let
Yeah.
us now turn to the record of their transgression and some other examples where, if the doctrine of divine origin and where if the doctrine is of divine origin and authority, we may surely expect to find it announced and the weight of its awful curse brought down upon the guilty victims. 1. The first transgression. Genesis 2 1 through 16. Uh, as this is the beginning of the sorrowful tragedy of evil, we may look for some distinct revelation of the doctrine in review. If it is of God, yet not one word is said in reference to it, nor is there any threat of punishment that can be mistaken for it. The serpent is cursed, and the ground is cursed, but neither the man nor the woman. And observe carefully all the
Wait a
words of
minute,
this.
wait a minute, wait a minute.
Actually, that's huge, yeah.
That is something. The man and the woman are not cursed in the storytelling of Genesis. Hmm.
Just the serpent and the ground.
Hmm.
And observe carefully all the words of the sentence. And while mention is made of evils to be endured in this life, not the most distant allusion is made to any evil or punishment beyond this life. Now, if the doctrine of that's right, it's all about suffering in life, working for
Hmm.
food and feeling the pain of childbirth. That's what I remember. God says to them. Now, if the doctrine of interminable torment after death be true, how are we to account for this? Can it be possible that God would be so careful to mention all the lesser evils and wholly omit all the mention of the terrible woes that are to have no end? Who can believe that a just lawgiver and ruler would deal thus with his people? And of all things, yeah, Mani, how would a just lawgiver and ruler deal this way with his people? Where's the justice there? And of all things, who can believe that the divine Father would deal thus treacherously with his own children? That's why it pisses me off. But how differently the case stands when we come to the doctrine of a present retribution for sin. In the very outset, God warns our first parents against transgression, and the most positive terms declares to Adam, "In the day thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die." Is not this clear enough? In the very day of transgression, they should die or suffer the punishment of their sin, and this surely be beyond question or doubt. And was this assurance of God fulfilled? Most certainly, for they had no sooner sinned than the retribution began, and they died to the peace and joy of innocence. The day of transgression was the day of judgment. They found that the wages of sin were death, or in other words, misery, fear, anguish, and the direful consequences of wrong, and that their case may profit their posterity. A careful statement of the mournful consequences of the transgression is made up and put on records as a warning to future generations. And now we got two, Cain or the murder of Abel. In Genesis 5 1 through 16. Here we have an example of the greatest of all crimes, murder, the murder of a brother. Surely we may now expect the doctrine of endless punishment to be revealed, and it would seem that, if true, there is no possible way to avoid mention of it. This was the first instance of this awful crime, and Cain standing exposed to the fearful penalty. This was the time to roll the thunder of its terrors through the world as a warning to the coming to all coming generations. This must have been done, if true. And yet, in the whole account, we have not a single word on the subject, not the slightest intimation of any such punishment was threatened. Murder. Now we're not eating fruit anymore. We're murdering a brother. And the whole record is as follows. And the Lord said unto Cain, the voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. This is all we have in the way of punishment or threatenings. And is there anything here that looks like endless torments beyond this life? Anything that would suggest the idea of a judgment, of such a judgment? Nothing at all. The guilty man is cursed from the earth, which is to refuse her fruits to his culture, and is driven out a vagabond. And there is the end of the account. And it is evident that Cain did not understand the threats of judgment as implying endless woe, for his fears are all confined to the earth. The dread of revenge, of being killed, and the horrors of the life of an outcast and a vagabond. And Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, be, imagine if the punishment was endless suffering.
Right, right, yeah.
Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid. And I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that everyone who findeth me shall slay me. These are all the evils of which Cain makes mention, and in view of them he exclaims, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Now we put the question, can it be that, beside the punishment here named, Cain was to be subjected to the endless torments after death? and yet be left wholly ignorant to the dreadful fate that awaited him? And if the guilty and wretched man thought the punishment actually denounced greater than he could bear, what would he have said if, in addition to this, there had been threatened the agonies of an endless hell? And it is possible to believe, if this was the purpose of God, that he would be wholly. And is it possible to believe, if this was the purpose of God, that he would be wholly silent in regard to it? Was it right to be silent if the terrible fate of Cain could have served as a warning and a restraint to all who should come after him? In verse 15, therefore, whoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. If infinite endless torment is the punishment of Cain, how can sevenfold more than this be inflicted on another? Yet so it is written, and therefore either Cain's punishment was not endless woe, or there can be no such thing as sevenfold endless woe.
Okay, let's read that again because it's worth it.
It's tricky math. So, is it possible to believe, if this was the purpose of God, that he would be wholly silent in regard to it? Was it right to be silent if the terrible fate of Cain could have served as a warning and a restraint to all who should come after him? And then in verse 15, therefore, whoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. If infinite, endless torment is the punishment of Cain,
Oh
how can
man.
sevenfold more than this be inflicted on another? You can't. Multiplying infinity by 7, you still just get infinity.
Mm-hmm.
It's meaningless. Yet so it is written, and therefore either Cain's punishment was not endless woe, or there can be such a thing as sevenfold endless woe, which is a ridiculous concept.
Wow.
The deluge, or the destruction of the old world, in Genesis 6 through, I don't know what that is.
That would
Here we
be that'd be puzzling. It would be a
I,
typo. That's what it is.
this notation is strange to me, but here we have one of the most remarkable examples of wickedness and judgment recorded in the Bible. And if ever anything is to be said on the subject of endless punishment, we may look for it here with the certainty of finding it. The description of exceeding wickedness of the people who were destroyed in the flood may be seen in verses 5, 11, and 13 of chapter 6. The heart was given to evil, and only evil continually. The earth was filled with violence, and all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. Here then was precisely the time, here the circumstances, which required the revelation and preaching of endless punishment, if, as affirmed, its influence is retained in saving. This was the occasion of all others to make it known that, through its terrifying and subduing power, the depraved and corrupted people might be turned from their sins, and the world thereby saved from the overwhelming horrors of the flood. So he's calling back to his original question, which is, you know, the argument that the idea of hell makes people stop being evil. And if that's true, then how come all these evil people didn't get taught it? And yet, here too, not one word is said on the subject in the whole account. Noah, who was a preacher of righteousness, was not a preacher of endless punishment. No mention is made of his ever having breathed a syllable in reference to
Let's
it.
throw in a comment from Monty. Noah was not a preacher of permanent annihilation either.
Right, no. Preacher of righteousness. Nor is there a single line in the record of this event showing that God threatened this or that any attempt was made to restrain or reform the people through its influence. If the doctrine exerts the favorable influence ascribed to it, did God do all he might have done to reform and save them? But again,
Wow.
in the account of their judgment, we are told that they were destroyed by the flood from the face of the earth, everything that had breath. And with this, the record closes. Now, if, as asserted, they were not only destroyed by the flood, but were afterwards subjected to the tortures of the world of ceaseless woe, it is not passing. Is it not passing strange that no mention is made of this, not even an allusion to it? Is it possible that everything else should be carefully related, even to the height of the waters above the mountains and the numbers of days they prevailed, and yet that the endless and indescribable torments of hell, the most terrible part of the judgment, and the most important to the world and to us should be wholly omitted, and that without one word of explanation? That's it. They were very precise in the description of the flood. Destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Here we have another instance of remarkable wickedness and of terrible judgment. Yet on examination, we find no warning given to the Sodomites of an endless fire, to which the soul would be subjected after the fire by which the body should perish. The extreme wickedness of the people is set forth with graphic power
All right,
in the
hang on,
scene
hang on.
described.
I got this thought here. I thought I'd
Yeah.
share it right. So he's specifically attacking the Christian doctrine of endless conscious torment. But in the whole thing, wrapping it up, it's definitely saying that a doctrine has entered the Christian theology that wasn't there. So maybe, Monty, and all you guys who believe in permanent annihilation, maybe your doctrine of permanent annihilation also wasn't there, because the promise of the resurrection is all through the Old Testament as well. God kills and makes alive. So, how big my question is, how big do we take this infiltration pagan theories and pagan mythology? Go ahead.
I think right now he's well beyond delivering the point he's trying to make. I mean, it was made in his discussion of Genesis. It's absolutely true.
Here in Titus chapter 1, verse 14, Paul warns about heeding Jewish myths.
Right.
Here in 2 Timothy chapter 4, Paul says something about being turned aside into to myths. And in 1 Timothy chapter 4, he warns about profane and old womanish myths. So how you like them apples? All right, continue. Hello, Justin. Nice to see you.
Hey, Justin. Boom, fist bump.
You have to speak up, Justin, if you're trying to talk to us. All right, continue.
So on examination, we find no warning given to the Sodomites of an endless fire, to which the soul would be subjected after the fire by which the body should perish. The extreme wickedness of the people is set forth with graphic power in the scene described in chapter something 23:33, and it would seem a proper occasion for a revelation of endless punishment, if true, for such, if any, must certainly be its victims. But if we turn to the record, chapter, 19, 24:25, we find it contains no hint of the matter, neither in the way of warning to the Sodomites, nor of history for restraining future transgressors. If true, how is this omission to be explained in harmony with the acknowledged principles of justice, to say nothing of mercy? So, in other words, it's an acknowledged or agreed upon principle of justice that, in order to be just or to justly account for somebody's wrongdoing, they need to be apprised of the consequences of their wrongdoing before they do the wrongdoing.
Mm-hmm.
What
And
is this? The origin and history of the
doctrine of hell,
No, but who wrote
or the
this?
doctrine of endless punishment. This guy,
Mr.
Thomas
Thomas
Thayer.
B. Thayer, back in 1871, during
Is
the
that
cowboy
the
days.
one? Is that the one who made the Thayer dictionary?
I doubt it.
Okay.
I don't know, though.
Never heard of it.
This
Well,
is found
it's a
over.
lexicon, so maybe. Oh no, it's Joseph H. Thayer is the one who made that one.
So you'll find this book, ladies and gentlemen, over on Tent Maker. And if you go down to the show notes, I put the link for this book found over on Tentmaker, so you can have your own copy. And if you want it on your computer, it does not have a download link that I saw, but all I did was hit Command P on my little Mac, which says print, and print and download are kind of like the same command. So it'll print it to your computer, but it won't print. It'll just download it. See, I figured out a way around it.
Nice. Do you like it,
Go.
Justin?
Well, I just got here, but it
Oh,
looks good.
Mm-hmm.
so far, it's pretty good.
It says there's 200 pages, which means it's a comprehensive work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the introduction, he says he could have gotten a lot longer.
Yeah, for sure.
What would we say of a ruler who should publish a law, affixing to it the penalty of 10 stripes for every transgression, and then, having inflicted this, should proceed to burn the offender over a slow fire till he sank under the torture and died? And what should we think if, with a devilish ingenuity, he should contrive to keep every one of his victims alive for a whole year, for 10 years, in order that the slow torture might be lengthened out that time? And all this kept secret when the law was published, and the trivial penalty of 10 stripes declared as the punishment. Yet this is precisely the state of the case in the judgment under review, if the Sodomites were sent into endless torments. The difficulty is not removed by reference to Jude 7, for in the first place the expression suffering the vengeance of eternal fire does not establish the point of endless suffering, eternal fire and endless fire being two things quite distinct from each other. The original word means simply indefinite time. In the second place, it is said they are set forth as an example, suffering the vengeance, etc. Now the very argument is based on the fact that the history of the overthrow of Sodom does not furnish an example of endless torment, since not one word is said on the subject by Moses from beginning to end of his account. Where then is the example? Admitting the common interpretation of Jude to be correct, is involved in inextricable difficulty. For first, it states a falsehood, since the Sodomites were not set forth as an example of endless punishment in the invisible world, as no record of it is given by Moses or the prophets or any sacred writer. Second, how is it that all mention of the matter should have been omitted until the time of Jude and then be introduced? I don't know this passage. I don't really know Jude that well.
It's not worth knowing.
Okay.
It was it's part of the circumcision letters, and
Jude's a
I
prophet, right? Like a so-called minor prophet, I think.
no, he's New Testament guy.
Oh, okay.
He's
He,
an apostle.
Oh, huh. And he referred to the punishment.
He's a brother of James. So you know how the James game goes.
Yeah, gotcha. If there is any restraining power in the example, why was it concealed from the world more than 2,000 years? Why was not the awful fate which awaited them revealed to the victims in the first place? It might have saved them. Why did not the sacred historian give account of it, that the millions who lived and perished between the event and the time of Jude might have had the benefit of the example? If he was inspired, did he not know it? And if so, why was he silent? But as an example of divine judgment on the wicked here in this world, visible to all future generations of men, the destruction of Sodom was worthy of special note, and exactly to the point of Jude's argument. And it is under this light that is seen by some of the best informed Orthodox commentators. Benson, in his note on the place, says, by their suffering the punishment of eternal fire, St. Jude did not mean that those wicked persons were then and would be always burning in hellfire, for he intimates that what they suffered was set forth to public view and appeared to all as an example or specimen of God's displeasure against vice. That fire which consumed Sodom, etc., might be called eternal, as it burned until it had utterly consumed them, beyond the possibility of their ever being inhabited or rebuilt. Whitby's remarks are similar. They are said to suffer the vengeance of eternal fire not because their souls are at present punished in hellfire, but because they and their cities perished by that fire from heaven, which brought a perpetual and irreparable destruction on them. Nor is there anything more common and familiar in Scripture than to represent a thorough and irreparable visitation, whose effects and signs should be still remaining, by the word aeonios, which we here render eternal. Gilpin, whoever the heck that is, says the apostle cannot well mean future punishments because he mentions it as something that was to be a visible example to all, and others to the same effect. See Page's selections on the place. And thus we might follow out the inquiry in regard to every case of exceeding wickedness or of great crimes, and we should find a specific statement in every case of the judgments inflicted on earth up to the article of death, but the same marvelous silence in regard to the additional judgment of endless torment after death. We have accounts of the builders of Babel, Joseph's brethren, the destruction of Pharaoh and his host, Lot's wife, etc. But
Sorry.
that's okay. But not a word in any of these judgment kindred to endless woe, not a word of any judgment after death. If these sinners were given over after suffering the punishments recorded in the Bible to infinitely greater punishments to be perpetuated without end, then the most studied concealment has been purposely maintained in regard to the subject by the scripture writers, or else they were as utterly ignorant of the whole matter as we are. But no conceivable reason can be imagined for concealing this tremendous fact, if it were a fact, but every reason for revealing and affirming it to all the world. If they had known or believed anything of the sort, they could not have been silent. The only possible inference is that the people before the law certainly knew nothing about the doctrine of endless torment after death. If true, it has not been revealed in the long period of 2,500 years from the creation to the giving of the law on Mount Sinai.
Hang on just a second.
Yep.
Now, there are some guys, over in the Christian camp who say, well, eternal torment, I'm not so sure. God showed me it'll be permanent annihilation.
Right.
It won't be endless conscious torture. God showed me. I used to be a eternal torture guy, and then God showed me its annihilation.
Yeah. I see
And
that.
one weird thing I have noticed is that the annihilationists and the eternal torment guys never point the finger at each other and say, you're teaching a false doctrine. But they both get together and point the finger over at the universalists saying, you're teaching a false doctrine. as long as they have some such camaraderie with each other, they don't bust each other's chop for teaching a false doctrine. But one of them must be false, permanent annihilation or endless torture. One of them must be false, so they should point the finger at each other and say,
That's
yeah.
interesting.
Let me add to that, Ace, and say, as someone who has come to the understanding of universal reconciliation, I was probably the only person I knew as an annihilationist who could not stand the eternal torment people and would constantly be. I mean, that was like my whole point of like even ministering anything, was to show people that that was a blatant falsity, the hell doctrine and the eternal conscious torment doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
And the point being in that is that, if they're really honest with the truth, eventually they're going to come, and of course everyone's going to come to, because it's God's will, the knowledge of the truth. But I feel like if they were really honest and really cared about what the truth actually was, it would eventually lead to believing verses about God becoming all in all. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, most of them don't bust each other's chops over something that is a huge deal. I mean,
It is a huge deal.
this is like,
Permanent annihilation is a huge deal. It has bad implications on the deity.
yeah, and even worse is the eternal conscious torment one. They both
Right, that
have,
has bad implications too. But permanent annihilation, that means God is kind of stupid.
yeah, one. Well, that's literally what, when I I was told that's pretty. So if I don't believe, I'll just be permanently annihilated. But if I believe, then I won't be permanently annihilated. That makes and I and she said that's stupid, and I said yeah, I agree. When I was an annihilationist, because it does make God look really stupid, and one makes God look really stupid and evil, but one makes God look like you know I mean, something you've never even thought of before.
Just a tremendous monster.
Yeah, like I don't, I
Like
don't
Lovecraft
understand.
kind of monster.
Like the anti-love,
Right.
everything that
Exactly.
in the while calling it love, they'll say, oh, but he'll torment you forever if you don't believe with your free will. I mean, that's insane.
Better
All right,
do it.
Hey, you
pick it up
better
there.
shape up.
Where are we, Mac?
God would have kept his children. Yeah, it is impossible to believe that, if true, God would have kept his children in the dark all this while. That no hint of it, no allusion to it, should have found a place in his revelation to the patriarchs. That he should never have threatened anything bordering upon it in such cases of extreme wickedness as that of Cain, the Sodomites, and the corrupt inhabitants of the old world. That's it. I mean, if it's true, then how come there was no teaching about it? There would need to be teaching about it if it was true. It would be the biggest thing to teach about. It would be the one thing you have to tell everybody about.
Yeah.
The just and by the way, in my opinion, according to my stupid will, if that was the truth, then I'm not interested in worshiping God. You know, I'd be saying, "All right, better do it because you're not a good creator. Screw you,
I think I
asshole."
think there's literally no win in any. I mean, the whole thing is just a mess. Like there's no win in worshiping God. There's no win in not worshiping God. There's no win in rebelling against God. There's no win in serving God.
I'll
That's
be
The
right.
right
whole
back. I'm going to refill my
the
coffee.
whole thing's a
All right.
mess. I was thinking one thing we should do
Uh,
is find a video on all the like I found a video on YouTube. It said 50 denominations or something, and I want to just see what I want to go through this list and just be like, do these people really believe the Bible? You know what I mean? I'd like to do that on this channel. Like we could listen to one of these videos about like 50 denominations or something, and we can be like, okay, let's take notes and what do they not believe? And I bet the list will be like ginormous.
I don't think there'd be a lot of. I mean, I think that the errors are pretty common. You know,
Well,
like
yeah, but it would be more interesting if we just showed it over and over again that the
yeah,
errors are so common that like whether it's Baptist, they're all the same thing.
exactly.
But that's what will make it so much more funny if we actually um go through all of them individually and just be like, oh, this one's even more off base than the other one. But they're all so far off base that it's like, are you serious?
Well, I suggest if we do a denomination bashing show that we have Saint Tommy be part of it, so
Oh,
so he can shame us for our lack of fellowship.
yeah.
Because he does have a point about that.
About what?
Well, you know, even if people are wrong about their understanding of God and stuff, they're, you know, I've been wrong. I'm wrong right now, probably about stuff. They don't
Right.
deserve to be bashed about it. That's all.
No, I agree.
They're just growing just like we are.
Yeah.
But it could be instructive to be like intellectually critical of their belief systems,
Yeah.
just not personally critical. And I think that's what Tommy's whole point is, and that's what I appreciate about him is, he's all about like keeping the family together and
Right.
yeah, not excluding each other. I mean, it's a futile thing because everybody loves getting into their own camps, but Tommy does his
Yeah, it's
best to
just,
straddle the camps.
well, it says that there must be divisions among you, right? So
Yeah,
this is what
it's
must be.
futile, but it's noble. That's what I think.
Yeah.
But I'm eager to get to. I think it's not till like the 5th chapter that he starts talking about the the ancient origins of the idea of hell and kind of how they crept into Christianity and Judaism.
Yeah.
That's an interesting subject to me. But
Yeah.
I think a lot. I think one of the foundational mistakes that almost every denomination makes is that they all think that they're a lot more ancient than they really are, and that the ideas behind them are a lot more ancient than they really are. And so pointing to how like Zoroastrian or Babylonian, Egyptian ideas kind of got into the Bible and stuff and into the faith, not into the Bible, but into churches. Um, I think that that's sort of like mind blowing to people. Like, what do you mean that in Adam and Eve's day they didn't believe in hell? Well,
Right.
they definitely didn't. If they did, they would have talked about it a lot more. So
Yeah. It's just, I'm just trying to figure out, like, are these people like legitimately looking for the truth, or they?
that's a
I
good question. I think that's a great question.
That's what I'm trying to figure out recently, because I know God has to give it to you,
Right.
but I also tend to think that if someone wants to know the truth, that God's probably going to give it to them. And it seems like a lot of these people, like, and it might take time, granted, but
And he's going to give it to them good and hard.
yeah.
I think whether they want it or not.
And it's like, well, what I mean is to believe the truth, though. And
Well,
like,
the whole thing about sincerely seeking the truth, I think that's a great question because it's there's such a difference between, you know, talking about your beliefs w- while actually talking about yourself, and discussing and questioning and trying to understand. Real truth seeking requires humility and requires you
yeah.
to get yourself out of the way. That
Yeah, and
you know,
I just look at, I mean, I can see over and over again, like, they claim to be seeking, or to know it or whatever, but like, it's
right?
like, I mean, when I see, like, one thing James Corum said was, if someone, like, and this made me think of the whole, a lot of the communities on YouTube, uh, is if someone's not willing to be serious in regard to their pattern of words, or
Hmm.
their, or how they treat other people,
Hmm.
or things like that, if just other means of seriousness, right? Then why do you find it surprising when they're not willing to take the scriptures very seriously either, like the study of them and the careful examination of things, and evidences, whether it be in the scripture or it be in anything else, just care, actually having reasonable foundation for uh plain, what he said. What did he say? He said something like, um the response, the something to be right has the responsibility of being right, or something. What's the phrase? It's a,
Is this something Paul said?
no, something Coram said. He said, he said something along the lines of like, but basically the idea was like, if you're going to say that you're right, you're going to have to um be studying and
Mm,
not and have firm foundation for the things you say you're right about, because like there's one question that I'm calling the Jane Corum question now, that is, does this settle it for you?
hmm,
And I think that's a really interesting question, because if we just act, because I've had a lot of trouble with like the idea of like, when is it settled, you know what I mean, like
right.
what, because it feels like a never ending like search. But does this settle it for you? Like, can I just look at all these verses on universal salvation and be like, that settles it? You see what I'm saying? Because even when it comes to the beliefs I had before, I guess when I think about it, like, okay, annihilation is just destruction, but it was just not permanent, for example. So there's still a foundation that settled that in a way, right? And I guess what I'm saying is that like, does this settle it for you is a really interesting question, because a lot of the time you have all these conjectures and inferences that, how does this settle it for, like, maybe that's the question to be asking, is why does this settle it for them? Is it actually because they're looking at the evidence, or are they just have a dogma, you know what I mean?
All right, let's get back to it. Mac.
All right. The just and inevitable conclusion then is that for 25 centuries God had no design or thought of inflicting so dreadful an evil as endless punishment on his children. And therefore, if we find it revealed in any subsequent portion of the Bible, it will be evident that it is a purpose which he has formed since the patriarchal period, that it was not a part of his original plan of the world, but something which he has incorporated into it since. The next step, therefore, in this inquiry is to make examination of the law records in order to ascertain if we have any revelation of the doctrine there. I'm going to have to shove off, Ace.
Okay.
Getting some beckonings from the family unit. So
Well, thank you for your help this
yeah,
morning.
my pleasure.
And
It's always a great pleasure, Ace, and I'm glad to have a little time with you too, Justin. You guys
Yeah,
keep up
of
the good
course.
work. Keep up the good work, or else you'll go to hell.
Right?
That ought to keep you on track.
Yeah.
All right, brothers. Thank you. Take
bye
God
bye.
bless.
Let's see, it's 8 minutes after 8. I'm going to be interrupted here at, let's see, about quarter till 9. Yeah, so let's charge ahead. Do you want to read, Justin?
Sure.
Chapter 2.
The period under the law. It is quite exclusively known and allowed by believers in the doctrine of endless punishment that it is not revealed nor recognized by the law of Moses. The facts in regard to the facts in this regard are so palpable and conclusive to every diligent student of the Bible that it would be difficult to deny that the Mosaic disposition is altogether a dispensation of earthly rewards and punishments, that its retributions follow promptly on the steps of transgression. Both the records of the law and the history of the Jewish people through a period of 1,500 years show this with a distinctiveness and fullness beyond all question, as we shall presently see. argument from the law itself and from the history of the Jews. Let's examine the remarkable statement of the question contained in Deuteronomy 8:28. Space will allow me to quote only a few verses, but I I earnestly consult the reader before going any further to take up the Bible and carefully pursue the entire chapter, which is exceedingly important to our inquiry. It shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and statutes which I command thee to this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Cursed shalt thou be in the city, cursed shalt thou be in the field, cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body, the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy cattle, and the flocks of thy sheep. Cursed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shalt thou be when thou goest out. The Lord shall send upon thee cursing, vexation, and rebuke in all that thou settest thine hand unto for to do. He shall smite thee with consumption, and with the fever, and with blasting and mildew. And the Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee, and until he shall consume thee out of the land whither thou goest to possess it. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee till thou be destroyed, because thou hast hearkened not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee, because thou servest not the Lord thy God with joyfulness and gladness of heart, for the abundance of all things. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee, in hunger and thirst, and in nakedness and want of all things. And thine enemy shall besiege thee in thy gates, until thy high and fenced wall come down, wherein thou trustedest. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. Thou shalt become an astonishment and a proverb and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. Now,
So far, so good. No eternal hell here.
right now, here in this important document, we have set out a great length, and with every variation of specification, the judgments and punishments which God threatens to visit the Jews for their transgressions of his laws. But not a word is uttered in respect to the punishments of an endless hell after death. All the evils which are to fall upon them are of temporal character. Such only can be inflicted on them while in the body, while on earth, plagues and sickness, murrain on the cattle, mildew on their vines and grains, locusts in the field and orchards, hunger, thirst, nakedness, curses on the city and the country, curses on the home and abroad, desolation of their country by their enemies, exile and captivity. These are the only penalties annexed from the law of Moses of which we have any information, and these were fully visited on the heads of the offending and rebellious people. There runs through their history a system of strict and retributive judgment, whereof the God of Jacob is the administrator. Within the pale of this peculiar dispensation, virtue met its recompense, and vice its punishment, with a regularity that was at once unfailing and notorious. At once unfailing and notorious. The nation is presented to us under a very different attitude, or under very different attitudes, under judges and under kings, in peace and in war, victorious and vanquished, prosperous and afflicted, at home and abroad, free and in bondage. But whatever the situation or period in which we view their history, we are met with at once by the principle in question. This is strictly true the entire history of the Jewish people as a nation and as individuals, and from generation to generation, shows us what exactness of the threatenings of the law were fulfilled in judgments. When they were obedient, the Lord prospered them and rewarded them with fruitful seasons, with increase in wealth and power, and made them superior to their enemies. But when they were wicked and rebellious, then followed the adversity, defeat, captivity, and all the physical calamities threatened by the law. But all this while we have not one syllable of an endless woe, which is to be added to all the other woes. in no instance of rebellion against God, not when their corruption and idolatry were at the highest crime and blasphemy, do we find them threatened with torments of hell beyond this present life. Should highlight that, beyond this present life. One sec, let me get my coffee. It's on the windowsill. Now, if they were exposed to this, if they had actually been cast into this hell, it is the most uncountable thing in the government of God that he should do this without one note of warning to the victims, and at the same time leave not a word or line of their awful fate on this record as a terror of future transgressors. But let us now look at one or two cases of an individual crime where we may we may justly expect to find some declaration of the doctrine if true. The case of Abimelech, Judges 4. We have his offense stated in verses 5 and 6. And Abimelech went unto his father's house, Oprah, and slew his brethren, the sons of Jerubbaal, the sons of Jerubbaal, being 70 persons. So that's 70 people. Upon one stone, and all the men of Shechem gathered together in the house of Millo, went and made Abimelech king. Here is the sin. It is horrible enough. Nothing can surpass this bloody sacrifice of the altar of ambition. At one fell 70 murders, save one, and the victims of his own brethren, bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh, and through this sea of kindred blood, he he waded to the throne. Surely, if ever there was a sinner of the hue of the blackness of darkness from Jude, this Abimelech was the man. And if the flaming pit of endless woe is not a fiction, but a solemn fact, we should now hear something in the way of compromising the sin of this guilty wretch, or compensating this guilty wretch. Well, here is the record. And Abimelech came unto the tower and fought against it, and certain women cast a millstone upon Abimelech's head, and to break his skull, and he cast it hastily to the young man, his armor bearer, and said unto him, Draw thy sword, and slay me, that men say not of me a woman slew him. And his young man thrust him through, and he died. Thus God rendered the wickedness of Abimelech, which he. Let me read that again. Thus God rendered the wickedness of Abimelech, which he did unto his father in slaying his 70 brethren, and all the evil of the men of Shechem did God render upon their heads. This is the whole record of judgment, but as we see, not a word of endless punishment. The cruel and bloody man is followed with an evil, with rebellion from his former friends who made him king, and at last, after many struggles, he is slain in battle, and the men of Shechem are burned alive in their strongholds. And their account ends and there the account ends with only this brief statement, thus God rendered the wickedness of Abimelech. Of course it was thus, or in the way set forth, then it cannot be that he is to be recompensed by endless woe. The recompense is complete, is a past event of earth, and cannot be a future world perpetuated throughout eternity. That's a good one. And all the men of Shechem, it is affirmed, that rendered upon their heads all the evil they had done. All the evil. Past time again, then and there he recompensed them, and not for a part, but for all of their doings. In the words of Bishop Patrick, God, the judge of all, punished Abimelech, the men of Shechem, according to their deserts, and made them instruments of each other's destruction. It is remarkable that this punishment overtook them speedily, within less than 4 years after the crime was committed. As yet, then, we have no revelation of this doctrine in review, but only the infliction of temporal punishments of the law. But one more example of another sort. Aniphophel, the suicide. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
In the wickedness and death of this man, we have a case of great moment. He was a very bad, unprincipled, and cruel man, as Dr. Clark says, died an unprepared and accursed death. He laid violent hands on himself, and this too in the midst of wickedness. Of such persons, the reader well knows what is said by believers in endless punishment. There is no hope for them. They die in sin without repentance. Their very last act is a crime for which there can be no punishment in this life. There is no charge after death. Therefore, they must sink into the endless torments of hell. This being the case, then, we shall surely hear of it now. If true, we are to have revelation of it under the law. We have come at last to the very occasion which will call it out. Doom of the guilty suicide will be clearly and distinctly announced as a warning to all who shall attempt to follow in his steps. Let us then turn to the record. And when Aniphophel saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his ass and arose and got him home to his house, to his city, and his household in order. Put his household in order and hanged himself and died, and he was buried in the sepulchre of his father. This is all, every word. Not a syllable of his being sent to a place of perpetual torture after his death. We are told that he hanged himself, died, and was buried. And there the sacred historian leaves him without one comment or one word of comment. Now, if there ever lived a man who would likely come into the pits of torments, if there is such a place, then this wicked suicide was the man. And is it a supposable case that such being his doom, and the divine writer would or could have passed it over with silence? Would he be careful to mention the unimportant matters that he saddled his ass and put his household in order and was buried in his father's sepulchre, and yet not uttered to so much as one word in regard to the awful subject of the interminable punishments, or sorry, torments, beyond the burial and on the beyond the grave? Who can believe this without an accusation against justice and the mercy of God toward all coming generations? So far, then, the law itself is a statement of penalties in the history of the nation of the Jews. The most remarkable cases of crime under the law preserve profound silence on the subject of hand. In not a word, not the most obscure allusion to the doctrine of endless or unending punishment is to be met in any of the divine records of transgressions or judgments. The testimony of the Orthodox critics and theologians. Section 2. The purpose of this section is to confirm the argument of the preceding section by calling in as witnesses some of the most learned and impartial scholars, divines of the Orthodox school, themselves believers in the dogma of endless hell, but confessing that is not taught in the law of Moses nor in the Old Testament. Millman. The sanction of the Hebrew law is founded extraordinary. The lawgiver, Moses, maintains a profound silence that fundamental article, if not of political, at least of religious legislation, rewards and punishments in another life. He substituted temporal chastisements, temporal blessings. On the violation of the Constitution followed inevitable blighted harvests, famines, pestilence, defeat, captivity. On its maintenance, abundance, health, fruitfulness, victory, independence. How wonderfully the event verified the prediction of the inspired legislator, how invariably apostasy led to adversity, repentance, and reformation to prosperity. Bishop Warburton. In the Jewish Republic, both rewards and punishments promised by heaven were temporary only. That's a good one. Temporary only. I like that. Such as health, long life, peace, plenty, dominion, diseases, premature death, war, famine, want, subjections, and captivity. And in no place the Mosaic Institutes is there the least mention or any intelligible hint of the rewards and punishments in another life. When Solomon restored the integrity of the religion, he addressed a long prayer to the God of Israel, consisting of a solemn petition for the continuance of the old covenant made by the ministry of Moses. He gives an exact account of all its parts and explains at large the sanctions of the Jewish law and religion. And here, the writings of Moses, we find nothing but temporal rewards and punishments.
Temporal rewards and punishment. In case you don't know what temporal means, it's temporary.
Right.
It's not eternal. Go ahead.
Warburton Warburton and also Wateley. How do you say that? What do you think?
Wateley sounds fine.
Yeah. And also Wateley quoted below take ground that the doctrine of future existence is not recognized in the Old Testament, and this they were wrong, as we have attempted to show in the 5th section of this chapter. Arnold or something, I don't know. This author is quoted by Warburton, who calls him a great and shining ornament of the Gallican Catholic Church. His testimony is the following: it is the height of ignorance to doubt this truth, which is most common among the Christian religion, and which is attested by all the fathers, that the promises of the Old Testament were temporal and earthly, and that the Jews worship God only for earthly blessings. Haley, this Mosaic dispensation dealt with temporal rewards and punishments. In the 28th chapter of Deuteronomy, you will find Moses in prodigious solemnity, pronouncing the blessings and cursings which were awaited on the children of Israel under the dispensation to which they were called, and will observe that these blessings consisted altogether of worldly benefits and curses of worldly punishments. Professor Wines, it is conceded that Moses did not annex to his laws the promises of joys or threats of eternity, of terrors of eternity. The Hebrew legislator was restrained from annexing future punishments as sanctions to his laws by considerations of rising out of the character of his mission, etc. John, whose excellent work is a textbook of in Andover Theological Seminary, says, We have not authority, therefore, decided to say that any other motives were held out in the ancient Hebrews to pursue good and avoid evil than that which are derived from the rewards and punishments of this life. Late Professor Mayer, late of Theological Seminary of the Reformed Dutch Church in Pennsylvania, has the following in a recent volume of his sermons. It is evident to the careful reader, both in the book of Job and in the Pentateuch, that the divine judgment which is spoken of is always a judgment that takes place in this life. The rewards are promised to the righteous, and the punishments are threatened to the wicked are only awarded in the present state of being. No mention is there anywhere made in the writings of Moses of any endless judgment or judgment at the end of the world. The idea that God is the judge of the world pervades them everywhere, but it has relation to do with this earthly existence.
Okay, look, boys and girls, I have to close up shop now, but I'm kind of excited about this little book, and maybe in an hour we can pick it up again. I have
Make
some
sure
things
you
to
put a
do.
bookmark or put like a highlight on the 8.
Yeah, so let's see.
Stop like
In my tool chest, I have an arrow, so I'll use an arrow and
yeah.
point it down to number 8. There we go.
Make sure you save it too, just so it
What?
saves the arrow. Save it, or it won't save the arrow, right?
I, from my experience, it does save the arrow.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it depends on
If
what.
I save it, it makes the arrow permanently there.
Oh,
But if I don't save it, it just hangs there until I decide what to do with it.
right.
Thanks for stopping by, boys and girls. Give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't. leave comments. And if you believe in the Christian hell, well, tell us why in the comments you believe in the Christian hell. But in this book, which was written in the cowboy days, 1871, this book argues that the Jews stole between Malachi and the New Testament, with this 400-year period. The Jews borrowed a lot of pagan mythology and incorporated it into their Pharisaical stuff. And then one thing leads to another, and it enters into the Christian mythology. But the truth of the scriptures is that the dead are dead. There's no punishment after death. And the truth of the scriptures is that the resurrection is what we have to look forward to, and that all will be made alive in Christ. 1 Corinthians 15:22. And that God is the Savior of all, especially but not exclusively believers. 1 Timothy 4:10. Anyway, you got something better? You got a better theology? Leave it in the comment section below, and check back in an hour or two. We'll pick up part 2 of The Pagan Origins of the Christian Hell by Thomas B. Thayer. And that's my title. His title is a little more complicated. And you can find it. Just hop down into the show notes, and there's a link there to get this book for yourself, a PDF available. Grace to you, and bye for now.